Welcome to A Really Good Sex Chat, a podcast aiming to open up conversations about disability and sexuality. I'm your host, Candice Care-Unger, psychosexual therapist and specialist social worker at Care Rehab. Join us as we have frank conversations about sexuality, disability, fertility, pleasure, dating, and everything in between. This podcast is brought to you by Care Rehab and recorded on Warramai Country. In today's episode of A Really Good Sex Chat, we're talking with Michelle Donald, accredited psychosexual therapist in the UK. Her expertise formed over the last 20 years is in the areas of sexual issues related to spinal cord injury and the strains on relationships that spinal cord injury may bring with it. Michelle currently is working actively with the Contemporary Institute of Clinical Sexology as a tutor, the Backup Trust. She sees private clients, works with case managers, solicitors, and the Sexual Health Disability Alliance. Previously, Michelle has worked at the Stoke Mandeville National Spinal Injury Centre at Stanmore, Southport, Belfast and Osprey. Michelle is proud to have been part of a research project that was published looking at women's experiences of sexuality after spinal cord injury, and a full copy of that is available in the show notes. Michelle was co-chair and founder of the Lovabilities Global Festival in 2020, and we're so excited to have her with us, as she was also the most recently recognised Sexologist of the Year at the Sexual Freedom Awards in 2024. Thank you so much for joining us, Michelle, on A Really Good Sex Chat. It's awesome to have you here. I must admit, I've invited you on because I'm a huge fan, and so this is me getting my fangirl moment on as well, and being able to have this conversation with you today. It feels like a little gift that you've given me, so thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
And for people who don't know you or haven't been stalking you online and following your career, maybe you could just introduce yourself.
Yeah, certainly. I'm Michelle Donald. I'm a psychosexual therapist and I specialise in spinal cord injury and the other areas that go with that, such as Cauda, Equina, transverse myelitis. Obviously, sometimes that steps over into different areas as well, and I get clients with different neurological issues. But my main and my speciality is spinal cord injury, and I've been doing that for about 18 years now.
How did you get into it?
I was spinally injured in 1996. I'm a T12 complete paraplegic. And nobody wanted to talk about sex when I was in my spinal centre. And so I just thought, you know what, I need to get this sorted. I need to talk to people. And I've always been able to be quite open. So I was a travel agent before. I had a previous life. And then as soon as I left the spinal centre, I was very lucky. Then we got 5 months rehab. So apart from psychologically, we were pretty much ready to hit the street running, pardon the expression, wheeling. I just feel that was such an honour that we got to do the 5 months. So I came out of the spinal centre. I went to work for an organisation in the UK called Relate. They work with relationships in different areas. So I went to work for Relate and got my diploma working in couple counselling, and then went on from couple counselling because my goal was to work with psychosexual. I used to hear the psychosexual therapist next door laughing, and I had couples crying. I was like, oh my gosh, I
want to switch room.
Yeah. I went and did 3 years doing psychosexual therapy at postgraduate, trained with Relate then as well. And now I teach the Contemporary Institute of Clinical Sexology. And so I teach the disability element on that as well. So that's 18 years later. So that's how I got into it, just sitting at the spinal unit thinking, nobody's talking about sex and relationships. A long journey to get there, but it was one of the things I was so passionate about that I started right at the very beginning with the couples work and moved my way through. Yeah.
Beautiful. I hear stories like this and I think labour of love, really just passion to make a contribution, and also sometimes we don't know where we're going to go. You just start on the journey and next thing you know, you're like, this is the best choice ever. I feel like it's just been a good fit, and you sound like It's been a good fit for you too.
Yeah, perfect. Mm.
So these days you are still seeing clients clinically sometimes if you're not transitioning to retirement. And what else do you get up to?
So I see clients clinically after COVID. I used to go into, nearly all of the spinal centres I've been in at some point in my career. During COVID, obviously, everything went online. So that was good in many ways because it enabled me then to work with people all over the country any time of their choosing. And that worked really well. I mean, we all know that it's always better to have clients in the room. But often when I was working with clients, I was actually working in a spinal injury centre. And sometimes that's not the most comfortable place to work. There are lots of interruptions and lots of noises. And sometimes, more often than not, I would ask partners, if there were partners involved, to come and join the sessions, because obviously this is usually two people. Often, you can only learn so much working on yourself. So I thought it was really important to do all the couple work. So now most of my work is via Zoom. Apart from I go into Sheffield, and there's a private neurological centre there called Steps, and they're amazing. And so sometimes I go into there, or they send me clients, and I do their staff training as well. And yeah, apart from that, I've just gone semi-retired in January. So I do a lot of exercise. I've got a hand cycle at my local gym, so I do all the spin classes. I've got a personal trainer 2 times a week. I do my personal training, then I join a girls' circuit class on a Saturday. And then I've got a 90-year-old mother who's as fit as a fiddle. And she's done yoga all her life and swimming, so sometimes I take her swimming. So yeah, it's pretty full on. I don't know how I fit in full-time work before. So now I'm just working Tuesdays and Wednesdays, and the rest of the time is with my mother and my partner, because my partner works shifts, so I sort of work around his shifts. So it's a busy, and loads of friends all over the country. So I know obviously it's a much smaller country, so it's quite easy to get around. So I'll pop down to the south coast, which is only like a 5-hour drive. I used to think that was miles until I lived in Australia for a while, and then I was like, shit, I've only got to Brisbane.
Yeah, I was going to say, you're not even out of any state yet. You're still probably even in Sydney traffic, to be honest. But anyway,
Yeah.
So I just want to go back to your point before about like being on the wards or being in the spinal centres and kind of people coming in. And whilst it's great to have people face to face, Zoom or online therapy has definitely opened up the accessibility of psychosexual therapy. And I think for us in our team, it's also opened up the beauty of being time specific, and people are ready. When you have worked clinically, what does readiness look like for you?
That's a massive question in the fact that people are ready at very different times. So people in spinal units that have just hit rehab running, so to speak, again, and then that transition, I think there's so much information people have to take in at that point, and it's massive. And sex is often the last thing that people think about because they want to start things, but sometimes it's the first thing that people think about.
Correct.
It's very, very different for different people, but it's actually going home, managing their environments. Once the environments have sort of been looked at, then a lot of people go, you know what, I'll deal with this now, because it's one of the areas that for a lot of people, we know it's going to get emotional because it's going to be very different than it was before. And initially, it feels like, who am I and how am I going to deal with this? My body doesn't work like it used to, my spasms, my bowel and bladder. How am I ever going to feel sexy again? How am I ever going to feel like I can be on top again, or I can be dominant in this situation? So much changes, but I think we forget how emotional and what emotional buttons that presses. And it presses those grief buttons, and we've already had our grief buttons pressed, quite often. Wherever our spinal cord has been affected, it has affected us massively. It's affected how we think about our life. In the beginning, a lot of people, I find, will often try and push their partner away and go, why me? Why are you still with me? And you could have anyone else, and why me? And I did it. I know this. And actually, my partner turned around to me and said, I didn't fall in love with your legs.
Yeah, good answer.
And I totally forgot that. I totally forgot it was me. But I lost me. And a lot of people lose their identity. Who am I now that I'm very different? Who am I now that I feel like an old person before my time? I'm on a stick, or I'm in a wheelchair, or however your mobility has been affected. And then identity. Who am I now? My body doesn't work, and I can't please you, because a lot of people think that. But actually, there's so much. I had someone say to me, once you've had a spinally injured guy, you don't go back. That always made me laugh.
Because of the generosity.
Yeah, I was like, yeah, because they get to understand about how genitally focused some people have been. I'm not saying everyone. And they get to understand, actually, there's the rest of my body here that I can tune into. And I think that is massive. So yeah, there's so much that goes with it.
So many of us are encouraged to talk about sex early on. You know, we think about staff training and we're kind of, everyone should talk about sex or be available to talk about sex or be willing to talk about sex. What are your thoughts about when you get a client when you know it's just too soon for them? They're not ready. They've come because they think they're ready and you can tell that they're not ready. What's your approach in that?
I think, especially in rehab, the information needs to be there about where they can go when they are ready. And I think that comes with staff training, or literally just giving them permissions to talk about it when they're ready. And it is all about the PLICIT model: permission, limited information, etc. And that timed scale of PLICIT, and literally looking at permission as the first thing, and then limited information, specific suggestions, and then intensive therapy. And I think those stages can take so long to go through. And just to give someone permission to talk about it by saying something like, I know people that want to talk about sex early on, but some people want to leave it till later. This is your timing, but know that there are people out there, and here's some information when you're ready. Saying things like that early in rehab, and I don't mean necessarily at a rehab centre, because we don't all get the opportunity to go to one, but whoever the professional is, to be able to express that. So I think the key to something like that is training for staff, and then any staff member, whether this is OT, physio, literally everyone has to have that information, and just to know where to send people in your local vicinity. Because here we've got the Cauda Champions charity, and they're absolutely amazing. We have charities like the Backup Trust. They do mentoring for partners as well as the individual with the spinal injury, and then they do trips away that enable people to get their absolute independence. They don't make it easy, so they make you try hard. And I think that's really, imperative for relationships, that somebody that might feel like, God, I'm going to be a caregiver now. How does that impact the relationship? Because actually we learn that down the line, and especially if there's a compensation claim going through, I think it can slow people down, because we get stuck in the worst case scenarios all the time. And depending on how long that compensation goes on, that can really have a psychological effect.
For sure.
When you can go, right, I've just got to dig in here and get on with it and sort my life out, that can sometimes help psychologically. It feels hard work initially, but when you're sort of surrounded by solicitors and case managers going, right, okay, and then reading the reports, you're like, oh my God.
Traumatic, totally traumatic. And that perceived injustice, people can get really stuck in that place. So I definitely hear what you're talking about. And also you're going to appointment after appointment to say how bad things are, when we're also, on the other hand, kind of saying, well, let's also look at all the things you can still do. I kind of approach it like it's a game that we need to play, and you need to put this hat on when you're in that scenario, and then you need to be able to take the hat off and come back into your real life. But it can consume people. And in terms of sex, being able to actually talk about sex in that setting can be difficult. A lot of people don't get the compensation around the loss of sexual functioning even tabled, because they haven't talked about it. So I kind of am like, you need to talk about the impact this has had on your sex life too.
Yeah, because otherwise it just gets sidelined all the time. Because a lot of professionals are too scared to open up that box and talk about it. They'll talk about function, and they'll talk about fertility. And then there's that, like you said, age. A lot of people will go, well, yeah, normalising that we don't have sex after a certain age. And it's like, what?
You don't have sex once you have a disability, and that whole ableism piece. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, it's, again, that's people in the beginning bringing up the subject, isn't it?
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So let's chat about Cauda Equina. You talked about the charity that you've been involved with over the last few years, really. Tell me a little bit about some of the unique psychosocial and psychosexual challenges for people living with Cauda Equina syndrome.
Cauda Equina can sometimes get left out. And a lot of people with Cauda Equina often feel that, oh, well, I'm not as bad as you because I'm not in a wheelchair and I die, But actually, psychologically, I feel that Cauda Equina can often be so much more difficult because you don't know where you are with it. Quite often, we don't get the opportunity to go through a rehabilitation centre. So we don't know where we are. And then we get told all the time, oh, well, it's just this and it's just that. And then we don't get diagnosed for so long. And then so many issues have already set in. And then things like pain living with pain. And I try and reframe it in my sessions. What are the different sensations that you feel when your partner's touching you? What about different times of the day? So when you've taken your medication, when you've not taken your medication, let's look at setting up touching tasks, and not genitally touching, just figuring out on your body what you feel. And so many people will come back and go, oh, actually, yeah, it tingles. And initially they were saying how much that was pain. And then sometimes it's like, oh, well, it's on the higher end of annoying tingling. And so we'll try and find different words for them to use. Or the sensation felt strange, so that they can talk to a partner about what they're feeling. Because often they go, oh, don't touch me there because it hurts. Or I can't get in that position because it hurts. But actually, sometimes reframing that, or doing the exercise at a different time, because a partner can be really terrified. Once you've said, God, it hurts there, they're like, oh, never touch you there again then.
Correct, right? Yeah.
It makes them feel like, oh God, I've lost my partner. And so I think it's really important about how we, as the person with the spinal difficulty, how we actually talk about it, how we express it.
Neuropathic pain is definitely one of the biggest, most challenging areas to manage. People can get really stuck in the medication cycle, and then the sleep cycle, and that kind of becomes this very almost whirlpool of just torture. And then in amongst it, we're like, let's talk about sex and feeling sexy. And how do you approach that when people are saying, I can't sleep? And
Absolutely. And I think setting, because of the tasks in psychosexual therapy that are set, so the sensual focus, I think a lot of people call it sensate focus, but I like to call it sensual focus, because it is so much about what you feel and how you feel it. And also, you're looking at, as you just said then, looking at medication. Because quite often, I don't know how it is there, but here they get put on so much medication initially, and then 2 or 3 years down the line, you can look at someone else's medication and go, wow, this is good because the list has halved. And I think people think, I have to be on this forever. But if you think about the types of medication that we're using for pain, they're changing the sensation in your skin.
Yeah.
And sometimes that changes function. So you can think, actually, I don't feel this, or I don't feel that, or my erectility is different, or my erectility is nothing. And actually, sometimes it might be the sensation or the feeling. And often I think one of the biggest things that people struggle with is people with penises. I think it's really difficult because it's about actually, how do I get an erection? And actually, someone with a high level injury can have an erection, and I'm really struggling with this. How is it they can have an erection and I can't? So I think the education around that is absolute. That actually the damage is on their reflex area, and let's look at what can help. And the psychosexual can often, well, nearly always help in that area of work, because partners really struggle with that as well. I can't turn you on. How does that happen? How do we get, is there anything there? And getting the right help from an andrologist or the urologist, being able to find out actually what is the function there, and then know early on, because sometimes it's holding on to that hope and then finding out, actually, I'm going to have to change the way I think around my erectility and my ejaculation, because it has changed. And knowing that, to be able to deal with it, and that, or sitting there with it. And often with Cauda Equina, there's this, right, well, it might work next year, or it might work the year after. There's that window where often medics will go, well, we don't know yet, because we're in a grey area. And I do feel if people are told early on what their function is and have it assessed with a urodynamics test or whatever that is, because as we know with spinal cord injury, with Cauda Equina as well, it's on so many different levels. So sometimes we're like, well, which messages are getting through? And sometimes people are told, no, this is an absolute later down the line. But I think it's really important to know where you are early on, and have it assessed before, because often then there's that grief of, wow, it isn't working the way it used to, and how do I manage that? And how does a partner manage that? And how do I tell a partner? I work a lot at the moment. We're putting together some programs for people, and I don't know what the law is over there, but for people who haven't got partners, to be able to access sex workers that are experienced in being able to work with different disabilities. One guy that I worked with, he was just like, oh, now I've got the confidence. Now I feel like I know how my body works, because the sex worker, a somatic worker actually, that he went to see, absolutely was able to just to have so many conversations to build his confidence in a way that I couldn't.
Yes.
Because I was setting tasks for him alone, but actually didn't know how he'd feel. And that piece of work was imperative for him particularly.
Yeah. We sometimes use the terminology in Australia, like it's like a walking wounded type injury, because the rest of the community will see a walker without understanding the individual challenges and suffering that person may be experiencing in terms of bladder, bowel, sexual dysfunction, pain. What else would you add to this list of things that you think the community just do not understand?
Again, and as you say, it's bladder and bowel, and that's massive. And for a lot of people, it's about learning how to manage that as soon as possible. And again, one of my clients yesterday, we would not entertain a bowel management system such as Peristeen or anal irrigation, because he said, I don't want to touch that area of my body. I'm not going there. And so everyone's unique and has their different things. So someone might go, okay, I'm going to try anal irrigation and see how that works for me. But at the moment, this gentleman's really, really struggling with the loss of it daily, but absolutely adamant that he doesn't want to try that. So that was sort of planting seeds. And actually, because I am spinally injured, being able to say to him, you know what, I use this and I use it on a regular basis, and I'm able to get on an aeroplane and fly to Australia and not have to worry, because it empties me from a higher point in my body. I only have to think about it every other day, and it's like 50 minutes of my day gone. So I'll do some work sitting there on the toilet. I think it was the first time he'd heard it coming from somebody that had actually used it.
Okay. So you can draw on the lived experience part. You can switch hats when you need to, which is unique and probably one of the many skills you bring to it.
It's amazing. And I've been trying for years and years. And actually, yay, in this country now, we've finally got 2 people on the training program, one tetraplegic, one paraplegic of different genders. Now that they're on the training program, it's just fantastic, because one works for the Spinal Injuries Association, and that's just fantastic because he's already a counsellor. I feel like I can retire quietly now.
His support is embedded, and having like lived experience clinicians and lived experience staff. Yeah, I mean, that's absolutely the dream, is when you have people with lived experience and clinical qualifications. It's just like, welcome to the table, welcome to the party. Like, you know, it's such a good mix to be able to work alongside each other.
Yeah, and for people to be able to choose who they want to see. I was working really closely until I semi-retired with a psychosexual therapist, Sue Lennon, who I trained with, and she worked in oncology, and we found that our professions overlapped quite a lot with body image and medications and all sorts. So we started working together. So I started working with a client group that I hadn't really worked with before, with cancer diagnosis, and she started working with spinal cord injury, so we could overlap and fill in the gaps. That's been really helpful. And then people will say, actually, can I speak to Michelle because she's got a spinal cord injury? And some people are like, no, that's fine, I'll speak to whichever sex therapist you've got available.
Yeah, no one on our team has a spinal injury, but I know that sometimes the partners will specifically seek us out to have their concerns heard on that able-bodied front. But then I lean heavily on our peer support workers too, to kind of say, you know what, this is all common stuff. You know, it's the type of worries that everyone's talked about. And I do have, like, you know, the 20 years of collective wisdom of all the stories that I've heard along the way. To kind of say, you know what, I've heard every other wife say the same thing, or every other potential date kind of have the same question. The kind of community wisdom sometimes feel like a little vault that we can kind of share what other people have said.
The specialism of it all and bringing all that knowledge together, powerful.
So tell me a little bit about this. So we know with Cauda equina syndrome, you know, the psychogenic arousal is really important. So what kinds of things are you doing to try and help people tap into kind of waking up the brain?
With couple work, it's easier. So with couple work, literally, I'll set the sensual focus exercises and enable people to really start to have fun instead of it feeling medical. And I think being able to, you know, I always say the 3 Fs, you know, fertility, function and fun. Don't forget the fun. Because if you're trying to initiate something that wasn't fun last time, your initiation wanes and you think, you know what, I'm not going to initiate because they've been in a lot of pain today. I'm not going to initiate because they've the kids to look after, they've a hard day at work or whatever it is. So then initiation wanes and you're like, okay, it's been 2 months or it's been 6 months or however long. And then sometimes for people, it gets too far away that they think, well, I can't initiate now. And how do we do that? So the first thing that I do is enable people to try and initiate more often. So I'll set them up 3 tasks to do during the week. Often the biggest thing is keeping the pets out of the room.
Yep.
Have you said yesterday to our clients, have you got any pets? She went, yes, a dog. I was like, okay, is it happy staying out of the room where you're going to be? And she went, actually, yes. And I was like, thank goodness for that. Set up 3 tasks where they're together, but it's not genital focus. So it's literally for them to be together, to touch each other's bodies. And then one of them to lie down on their back and then lie down on their front, however it feels comfortable, because we've got to look at how that feels comfortable. So it's all about the exploring. And I find once you've set up different tasks like that, then I will bring in, as we do with sensual focus, I will bring in different things that people might want to use in the bedroom. So I'll get them to use their imagination. They don't have to go out and spend loads of money. Let's have a look. Somebody the other day used a plant sprayer and just sprayed their partner's body. And they were like, oh my God, that was nice.
Okay.
And they were like, I'm going to put it in the freezer for a while and see how that feels. And
Yeah.
so it's actually adding the fun. Somebody used a pan scourer. So it's soft on one side, the yellow bit, and then on the other side, the green bit, it's harder. And so they started like moving things up and down each other's bodies, so it becomes playful. And once you add in playfulness, often we don't forget about the pain, and I obviously don't like the word. We don't forget about uncomfortable sensations, but it helps.
Okay, because it's a bit of a distraction and it's a bit of playfulness, a bit of lightheartedness.
Yeah. So, and then people learn to play again, because people go, oh my God, this is like dating again. I got really nervous before we did it. And then you're more likely to want to set up at the next task. And then it's like, let's bring it. And people are so imaginative. I absolutely love what they come back with. Somebody a couple of weeks ago said, I put him on a stool in the middle of the room. So he was the one with Cauda, and he's balanced on this stool. And then he was holding on to this thing next to him. She said, I made him turn around. And so I could look at each part of his body when he was naked. And he said, I felt so nervous being observed. He said, so then I did it to her. And they had so much fun with that. Even working with high-level injuries. I think somebody had put in their mouth. They put a grabber stick, and they put this really soft material on the end of the grabber stick, and they'd moved up and down the bed with this soft thing in their mouth, touching their partner's side, and then asked the partner to turn over, and then touch the partner on the other side. And the partner said, "Oh my God, that's the first time they've made any effort." So it's always up to me to make the effort and actually to have to think about it differently. She said that just was so, I was like, yep, now I'm turned on. Now what do you need?
Yeah, interesting. The initiation fed into her arousal, and the part that fed into her arousal was the effort and the thoughtfulness and the kind of willingness to try something different.
Exactly it.
Cool. Okay, so your tasks are go home and explore with sensation and bring back in the fun and the playfulness. What's your third task?
So that would be for a while, and then I would look at the blocks.
Okay.
What's stopping? So I would take feedback after those few sessions. What's stopping you? What are the blocks? If they haven't initiated, how do they manage that if it's their turn to initiate?
Okay.
And one person hasn't initiated, how do they deal with that? Is it rejection for them? How does it feel? What's happened in that moment? What have they gone away with? Some people might express it because it really hits their triggers. And so we work with that. I would never set those tasks and not have a feedback session quite soon after.
Yeah, okay.
Because it's really, really important to be able to find a safe place for them to be able to talk about what trigger points might have been hit. So it might have been grief. They might have ended up really crying after this. So I never underestimate where it's going to take people, because if they're in the right space, sometimes it can take them to fun. But what's been in their relationship before they've got to this point, and sometimes that's where that comes out. And if people are on their own, I'll give them their own self-focused tasks to do. You know, how do you feel your own body? What sensations? If you're using a bath or a shower, how do you feel that on your skin now? When you wash your hair, tell me about how that feels. Really getting people to think about other bodily sensations. I
Yeah.
get them, if people are on their own, to do their own self-focus exercises. When you hold your penis, what does that feel like now? So you can feel it on your hand. I'm not directing them at this point. Tell me, was it warm? How did that feel in your hand? Did you feel any sensation? Tell me about feeling your testicles. So I'll get them to really think about and using a lubricant and to make friends with their penis, because quite often they fall out with it and they go, oh, it's only pee. I only pee out of it. And, you know, to make friends with their vulva, because so many people have not looked at themselves.
Or they're doing it just for catheterization, and that's kind of it, you know, like it's become a
Yeah.
medical task rather than a part of their body that could be a pleasurable part of their body. It's just become a medical procedure.
Yeah, absolutely. And really start to think about it, get people to do mirror work, look at it in the mirror. You know, one of the most powerful things that my psychologist said when I was in the spinal unit, I used to lift my legs up and go, they're disgusting, I can't feel them, they're flat, they're horrible. And he knew me at this point. He didn't suggest this third day in. And he said, put some stockings on. So I'd put like really pretty lacy stockings on, sticky ones, the hold up ones with the seam on the inside, so I wasn't sitting on it. And then every time I looked down, my automatic response was, that's pretty. And it
Oh,
really changed how I viewed my legs. They were still part of me. They were still alive, even though they didn't work the way they used to. So psychologically, that was a massive change. And then, so with couple work, then we'll move on to doing arousal and looking at how they move each other's bodies around, what needs to be done there, and keeping the excitement and the fun in there, and the couple compassion. You know, this is not always about the fun, but if they can get to the fun, that's fantastic. And they can move away from feeling like my body doesn't work in a way that I want it to, because then they start to experience, through time, they start to experience how it does work and how amazing it still is together or alone. And then that's sometimes, you know, when people are alone, it's about how they form relationships and what's going on there. So there is, you know, as you know, there's so much psychological work that goes with it. But the absolute fun is often the way that things move forward. And being able to communicate and be open, because people will say, I never thought I'd talk to someone else about my sex life.
there's probably some similarities culturally where many Australians don't grow up talking about sex. It's not really, you know, we do it at school in terms of like a PE class, but it's more biological and functional. There's a lot of assumed knowledge, but the truth is, like, the generation coming through now are acquiring most of their education from pornography, not really from, you know, factual or evidence informed sources. So we've kind of got that play as well. And I think that one of the unique psychosexual things I've observed with Cauda Equina and some of those really low level paraplegic injuries is, you know, really trying to tap into the psychogenic. Then porn becomes almost like a essential for some people, and then there can be a bit of a difficult relationship with porn where people are like, I don't actually want to use porn, I want to be able to
Yeah.
use my imagination. So, you know, it's kind of like, all right, we need the visual stimuli, or we need brain engagement. And so the first thing people will try often before they're, you know, having help with it is pornography. And then what else do you offer people in terms of psychogenic? How do you get the brain turned on? Have you got some strategies there that you will help people if they're trying not to use porn?
If they're in a couple, a lot of people will start to use role play or look at their partner. I think porn, as you say, it is helpful in some ways. Ask people what type of porn they're watching. Women will often say they prefer to read books. So obviously you've got your serotonin, your dopamine, your oxytocin that will fire off on ejaculation. But when the ejaculation isn't happening, the serotonin, the dopamine, and the oxytocin need to find a vent. And often for men, it has slowed down. So when they used to ejaculate, it was sort of straight out. It was their focus was the ejaculation because that's what fired those three chemicals. And to enable those three chemicals to fire off a lot slower, and for them to get used to that those chemicals are firing off more slowly, is part of the work that we talk about. But actually with porn, so we'll get them to look at our partner sometimes, and again here using a body worker to enable people to actually try it out with a real person, because quite often porn can fire off those chemicals so quickly because it's not a real situation. And then when you get into, I'm going to be old fashioned and call it a bedroom scenario, when you get into the bedroom scenario with a real person, then you don't feel as aroused because what's in front of you is not what is on the porn screen that was arousing you. So some people that have been using porn for a long time and been using the porn that they want to see, their chemicals are fired off at a really heightened point, whereas a partner can never do all of those things to fire off those chemicals. So it's finding where is it helpful and where is it not, and how do we fire off those chemicals differently. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yeah. So erotic literature is like one way, I guess, for people to slow down, read like the sexy stories, let the brain do some imagination, fantasizing about previous sexual experiences, like memory, really tapping into memory. There's some interesting stuff around remembering what sex was like before the injury whilst also giving it a go.
Well, it's like mirror work. Looking at your own images rather than images that are being put in front of you doesn't work for everyone.
Yeah.
But often with the female brain, they like to read things, and so they can have their own pictures rather than being given a scenario that might turn them off, where often men like something more visual rather than to have to make it up. That's just through experience that I found that. I've also found that high-level tetraplegics, a lot of them like things to be quite extreme and with a partner, and sometimes their partners don't want to be that extreme, but just the ones that have explored to get them to that heightened arousal. So really thinking about what it is for that individual, because not everyone's going to want to. Sometimes it's kink, let's try this, let's try your senses, because some people will say, well, you can't tie me to the bed, my legs don't work, and then I can't do anything.
Yeah.
But somebody a lot long ago had a swivel chair, and they tied their partner up to the swivel chair, so the person that was spinally injured was tied to the swivel chair, and then just and blindfolded, and actually then their partner was able to stroke their face and do things to them, but there was a little bit of, oh my God, what are they going to do next? How is this?
Anticipation.
Yeah, exactly. So it's about really, again, it's that playfulness, isn't it? Going back to playfulness and what fires off your chemicals. Sometimes, how did you feel about that before? Because our brain's brilliant. It does go back to that. And if we can hold on to those fantasies that are entrenched in our own brains, rather than just going, actually, that doesn't work anymore, so I can't do this. But it takes a lot of work to access for a lot of people.
And there's that whole neuroplasticity piece, right? Like the more people do it, the easier it becomes. And so, I kind of approach it like, there's a sexual rehabilitation part, and I don't mean it in terms of function. I mean that for some that may be part of it, but it's also about how do we perceive stimuli, audio stimuli, visual stimuli, taste, smell, etc. And then the repetition. So I kind of say it's similar to every aspect of their rehab. It doesn't happen overnight. You don't do it once and think it's going to be, resolved. It needs to be the right exercises, the right intensity. So that's kind of like, I guess I kind of put it into the rehab framework to try and get people to stick with something that maybe doesn't work on the first go. And there's a real need for patience in this space. Like people need to be kind of willing to make mistakes and it not be perfect.
Absolutely. And it's like, we get forced to manage our bowels and bladder daily. We have no choice. Something that used to be private, but having to do that daily. And so that becomes the norm. Whereas we don't get forced to have sex every day. So it takes longer, and it's up to us whether we do it or not. And I think sometimes bowels and bladder and sex are often put in the same pot, but actually it's so, so different. The education around it in the UK can be put in the same pot.
Same.
So I think it's really important to know that it is, for many people, a slower process because we're not doing it every day. It takes time, and like you say, the motivation to stick with it. And often with psychosexual therapy, people will stick with it because they'll go, oh, Michelle will tell us off and we've got to do this next week. And you know whether they're struggling with that or not. So you know how kind of fast to move the work or slow it down or deal with different issues that come up. So sometimes I'll do an initial session, set the tasks, and then I'll see them the week after just to see what the blocks are. And then after that, it might be 2 weeks after that one, set them up with different tasks. And then we get to genital focus and we might bring in vacuum pumps or PDE5 inhibitors, all the different things that they've been scared to use before. Because often we'll talk about vacuum pumps, and I think vacuum pumps have a place. I call them physio for your penis, because literally it is physio for your penis. And if you get used to using it, it becomes a little bit more normal, keeps your penis healthy. Sometimes people don't like to use it with a partner, but some partners love it and go, yeah, I'm in control of how big it gets today.
Yeah, okay.
And so bringing little things in like that as well, but later. And then after that, maybe it's once a month we'll go to, and maybe I call them kick up the arse sessions, pardon the expression, but maybe then it's just a half an hour session, which enables them to get more, I suppose, for their money at the end of the day, and when they're paid privately. And then it goes to the last session can be 3 months down the line, but they know they've got something to work towards. And then that's more about how do you maintain it. And I think that's really hard to do on your own. Psychosexual therapy is a way to manage maintenance, to keep it going. And actually, what a project that I'm involved in at the moment is so powerful, because in the UK, the law around me referring out to a specific person that's a body worker means that I can be cited for sexual activity in law if they complain about the person that I've referred them out to. But I don't want to refer people out to just any body worker. I want to refer people out to body workers that I know are blooming amazing.
Yeah.
So a piece of work we're doing at the moment is how do we train body workers and somatic body workers to work with different disabilities? And that's what we're looking at now, some e-learning. And then they can get little badges that say, okay, well, somebody here that I know specialises in working with people with spinal injury. And so that so they can refer themselves, but I can refer them to a website. So it stops me being cited.
Oh, wow. Well, yeah, we always talk about law and legal and economic and political things influencing, sexual health and sexual well-being. And that's a good example of how it influences it, the types of interventions that we're allowed to offer and not allowed to offer. The charity, can we just talk about that for a second? I mean, I think one of the unique things as an outside observer, looking in at the UK, is the fact that there is specialist Cauda Equina follow-up and charity services available. In Australia, a lot of the Cauda Equina injuries can drift a little bit. Like, the spinal services absolutely would welcome a Cauda Equina person into their peer support programs. But I guess the feedbacks from some of the Cauda Equina clients that I've worked with in the past have said, I don't know that I really belong or that I fit because I'm not a wheelchair user or I'm not as disabled, inverted commas, as other people. And there's a bit of a reluctance or just sometimes people don't feel as comfortable to go into all of the spinal community events. So can you maybe just tell us a bit about the Cauda Equina Champions Charity, what it actually is?
So they deal with all the red flags and they'll help you find all different types of support. That charity enable so much more than a spinal centre can give you as in psychological support, because they've got the psychologists and they've got the sex therapists, and each person with Cauda Equina can then get that for free, for 6 sessions for free. They do weekends away, so you can go and do a full weekend that is paid for, usually by lots of different solicitor groups, and you can go and literally spend the weekend with peers talking about different areas. Sometimes I go along and run a little clinic, so I can do sort of quick half-an-hour sessions to see where they are and what they need. So the charities are amazing at giving you so much support. The spinal centres are so grateful for that, because it enables them to go, right, anyone with Cauda Equina, here's your access, here's what you do. And the lady Claire Thornburg that set it up, obviously she's got Cauda Equina. She's just absolutely amazing. She will find anything that you need. So she's got people on the phone lines that'll just take calls. Yeah, it's a massive referral system, but also a group network. And we have an amazing, in fact, you can access this from anywhere. It's called Enhance the UK. They have a disability love lounge, which is brilliant. And they call themselves a non-expert experts. And so you can ask any questions without having to go for long periods of therapy. And there are other charities like the Backup Trust. A lot of the people that have been on their courses, so they have they call it the Wobbly Walkers course. And it's quite cute. And it's like actually anybody with spinal injury that still walks. And so they have different groups for walkers and non-walkers, and they have wheelchair skills courses, because a lot of people will find that have Cauda Equina will try and stay away if they are a walker from a wheelchair. But actually knowing the importance that sometimes that's going to free them up to be able to have a lightweight wheelchair that they can lift in and out of the car over themselves, or a partner can lift in the car without breaking their back, because you know how heavy some of these chairs can be.
Yeah.
So it also helps you in supporting how you get a wheelchair, and that in itself helps couples, because a partner who thinks they're gonna be a carer, for some couple dynamics that might work, but for a lot actually it's really important to know that you know, your life will change and you will get so independent, but you can't see it initially. It's so important to have all those things on hand, because it's about the relationship. Because people say, you know, why are we talking about this? This is sex therapy. And it's actually, this is relationship therapy, first and foremost, about how do we manage that relationship and the family that goes with it. You know, because sometimes people are at home in their living rooms because they've got an upstairs. And so one guy said to me, I've got carers that come in at the moment. My family go upstairs to bed and it's like I've completely lost them. And he said, and all I want to do, he said, my sex life, all I want to do is sit in bed with my wife on a Sunday morning and read the newspaper and have a cup of coffee. And I have a bed with sides on it that doesn't let me do that. And I've got to, and then we're always on edge waiting for the carers to arrive or not until later in the day. So all that uncertainty. So I think everything that we talk about is part of the sexual life, because it's part of how you feel comfortable with each other.
100%. What about for those that are dating, like the single folk and the people who are saying, okay, I'm ready to get back out there, I'm ready to start meeting people? Do you talk much about like the disclosure of Cauda Equina and how to explain it to a new partner?
Yes, absolutely. I remember a new partner. So I'd met him for coffee. I was like, oh my God, and really nervous. And I was on my way to do a job at a spinal unit, actually. So I was fairly dressed up with my little briefcase. And I said, look, I need a pee. Hold on a minute. And so off I went to the toilet, and he thought I'd gone, because obviously it took me ages. And he was looking outside at the car park going, where's her car? Is she still here? Has she just left me? And he was like, oh no, hat and her gloves are here. Obviously, hat and gloves in the UK. Hat and her gloves are still here. He was like, okay, where's she gone? And when I came back, he said, I was worried you'd gone. I went, yeah, I take a long time. And at that point, I thought, I'm going to take this opportunity now. So I literally said, yeah, I have to use an intermittent catheter, and it takes a while to get it out of his packet. And then I tried to make it funny and get it in the right hole. And he was like, oh, okay. And he took it in his stride. And I think sometimes it's about being fairly open, fairly early on. But that's about your own confidence. Where does that confidence come from? And often that's about experience. And next day we ended up, I was going to do a talk, and he was in the corridor and he was in everyone's way. And I just went, you might as well come in.
Yeah.
And he saw me do my catheter. And he was like, no wonder it took you a long time. Bloody hell.
That took a long time. Yeah, okay.
Sometimes it's about when do we disclose those, what we can feel are really personal things. Because then I said, oh, wait till you see me do my anal irrigation.
So you kind of use it as a way to break the ice and kind of like, this is it, baby. This is what you're getting. Are you in or you out?
Absolutely. It's like, that takes a bit longer. I mean, you're not going to be experiencing that until we go on holiday together. And then I'm going to shut the door. Yeah, using humour. You know, there's a time when I was with the partner that we had the accident together. He was a farmer, and he came in, he put his long glove on and just took the mickey, really. So I think sometimes it's about how we use humour.
Yeah.
Some of us haven't got humour to use. And it's hard because at the end of the day, people are going to ghost you. That's their shit, not yours. They're going to ghost you, and it does weed out the jerks. And, there was a young girl once said to me, I'm not ready for the jerks to be weeded out.
Oh, yeah, okay.
And again, that's where you are in your own headspace. When I send my biog out, there's a picture of me in my wheelchair. So I don't have to say I actually use a wheelchair. There's a picture of me in it looking glam, so to speak, or sporty. So putting pictures up that show how able you are, but with possibly your aid. Lots of people with Cauda Equina that I talk to initially have not told new partners. Some people have been in relationships over a year and they still haven't told their partner how they go to the toilet. They've hidden it and kept it quiet. And when I see clients like that, it's about their acceptance.
Yeah.
Like, how do you accept your own body? So we do a lot of work on acceptance and enabling them to think about their own body, and little tasks like looking at themselves in the mirror. I'm off to, there's a fabulous weekend in Manchester coming up, and it's called the Powdered Pussy.
Ooh, what happens at this?
It's an amazing weekend where it's about female empowerment. And there are some different groups for different genders to look at actually empowerment and body empowerment. So one of the things is pussy gazing.
There you go. With mirrors of themselves, or just of a wall, or the whole.
Yeah, so you can do pussy gazing on your own, but next to somebody, if you will. Or you can choose to do pussy gazing together. Now, because I look at my pussy, I'm going to call it in this instance, every day, 7 times a day, doing self-intermittent catheters, because I do use a mirror. I just find it easier.
Yeah.
Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. If it's not going in the right hole, it's like, I'm going to have to use a mirror.
Yeah.
And sometimes, and when I went last time, I remember thinking to myself, I'm really struggling to do this.
Because there's other people around? Or because
there's other people around, and because I'd like to talk about in the beginning with penises, making friends with your penis. Actually, I don't often look at it in a way that's sexy. I look at it just to put my catheter in. And I stayed and I did the task. And it was really hard work. So it's about sometimes facing your fears. I'm a psychosexual therapist, and I was really shocked that was a bit of work that I hadn't done. And when you're able to share it with another human being as well, because obviously you've got nursing teams around you and things like that, and you're sharing it with people that you haven't really given them consent, but you feel like you have to give them consent because they've got to look after your body.
Yeah.
Like initially bowel and bladder management. So I think consent is a massive thing about how to learn about how to ask for things and actually how to say no. Consent, the wheel of consent is a massive area of
Betty
our
Martin's work.
Yeah.
I love her work. This is okay. We're doing a plug now for Betty Martin. Everything about Betty Martin.
Betty Martin,
it's amazing.
Her little videos are just fantastic.
Yeah, waking up the hands, 3-minute game. Love them all. Yep, I hear you.
Absolutely love it. And there's other things like Sex, Love and Goop, which has been on Netflix, and actually looking at how different people do different therapies and what might work for you, because standard therapy might not work for everyone. So it's about how does it fit for you.
I think that sounds like a very interesting weekend. I mean, but it's also a reminder that, like for those of us that are doing psychosexual therapy, we're humans first with our own insecurities and issues. We happen to talk about sex all day long with other people. But as I joke to my husband, I say, you know what, the chef never cooks at home. Acknowledge this, because sometimes we're doing this work every day doesn't mean that we're perfect, infallible, have our own issues all completely resolved. It's just a commitment to our clients and being able to hold the therapeutic space for them. And just coming back to like the Cauda Equina group for a second here is like, I think one of the things that I find when I am working with my Cauda Equina clients is just how complex so many dynamics, so many domains of their life are, and how isolated they feel in it.
Yeah.
And that kind of loneliness and isolation, and just like, am I the only person going through this type of stuff? We've started a Cauda Equina group. It's only 4 weeks, but just the peer connection is online. It allows people wherever you happen to be, to come together. Those types of opportunities to realize you're not alone, and the horrendous pain, sleep cycle you're in, other people have experienced it too. The hard thing is when people are like, what's your answer to how do you fix it? And everyone's like, I have no answer. It's just shit. All I can do is kind of offer you condolences that we're in the same boat together. But I do think that there is a unique set of psychosocial and psychosexual challenges for people with Cauda equina syndrome.
Definitely. And it's about that individual having the courage to do it differently.
Yeah.
Because often when you get stuck, and it's okay to get stuck, and it's okay to get stuck for a while, but how long are you prepared to stay stuck? And is there anyone around that can help you unstick, so to speak? But once you start to explore things and have the courage to ask the questions and find the information, it is there. That's what brought the Cauda equina syndrome charity out, because Claire had the courage to go, sod this, nobody else is doing this. I need to do something about it. So sometimes you've got those cheerleaders that just go forth and pull things together and it works. I've never been a leader. I've always been a follower. And I love other people's work and just absorbing it. But it takes courage, because it's like getting on a long haul flight on your own for the first time.
Yeah.
It's absolutely bloody terrifying, but it takes courage. And sometimes the courage takes time. So don't give yourself a hard time, and know that your Cauda equina, your spinal cord injury, your transverse myelitis will change, because you'll grow. The medications you're taking will get less, the hypersensitivity will change, the pain will change, the uncomfortableness of it will change. You get used to being older before your time. And actually, so I'm semi-retiring, and going through the menopause was a massive thing, and we forget that all these different things are added on. And when I lost my desire because I was going through the menopause, that was another massive hit, and it took me backwards again. And I was thinking about but then I realized how many skills I had because of my disability, and how I could find help and how I could ask for help in a way that other people weren't. And now I'm surrounded by people that are going, oh, I've had a hip operation. Oh, I have a knee operation. I'm like, I'm so glad I can't feel half of my body. Because all my friends now are getting old, and I'm like, yay! I can back wheel balance down a staircase. I can throw my chair in at my car. And that's why I got to a point. I think sometimes, yes, it's great to be able to stay fit, to be able to stay on your legs, but make it easier for yourself, and really think about, like, there are wheelchair skills courses here to actually, how do you use your wheelchair in an effective way that it makes you more independent, it doesn't make you less independent. They're massive things, because when a partner sees that, or a potential partner in the future sees that, it's like, I said to my partner, what attracted you to me? A woman sat in a wheelchair, what attracted you to me? And he went, because you were funny, because you were confident. So my partner, I met him at the railway station. He put me on a train.
There you go.
I wasn't looking. He was my assistance guy.
Yeah.
And he put me on a train, and then he found me on Facebook. And I was like, oh my God, that was that man, that really nice man that put me on the train that I had a conversation with. And he said, because you were confident and strong. And he said, that's what came across, being confident. It's that unconscious thing about it as well, isn't it? When you see someone with confidence, and that couple fit, because couple fit's often about what's missing from our life that someone else can give us. And often that's unconscious, and confidence is always on that list. So I just challenge people to get out of their funk. I hope that means the same as it means in the UK.
It does. We're on the same page. It's fine.
Sometimes you don't need to say a rude word. Just get out and just have that confidence, and it takes time, and that's okay.
There is no race here. I think that's probably one of the big take homes. And recently I've had this conversation with a few different clients where they say, the first kind of few months, it was like so much disbelief that this was even happening. Their chat and their pickup skills were still in full form. And so one of the guys I work with, kind of met like one of the nurses, and she was a nursing student, and he goes, I'm so glad that I still have my chat and my flirt and my kind of capacity to woo the women in those early days and get some confidence,
Yeah.
going and they made a beautiful connection and they're still together all these years later, because as the pain has come and the complexity and the unemployment and all the challenges that come with that, it's like, I don't know that I'd have the confidence to date right now. But because I was such a flirt, like in the early days, it was
Yeah.
fine. And so I think confidence is something that can come and go, but it can come back again, right? And so it's
Yeah.
really about how do you maximize it and the things that make you feel like you again, and just tapping into all of that.
That dating side of things is really important to think about. I think you've got to be in the right place to start. If it's online dating, you've got to be in the right place to start it, because you need to protect yourself. And if you're going to get ghosted quite a few times, I'm just really remembering that that's their stuff, not yours. I remember seeing this young lady when I was at Stoke Mandeville Hospital and talking about the flirting skills. And she'd seen all these men doing some work, and she'd wheeled past and she'd used all those flirting skills. And then she came to my office and she cried and she just went, "Doesn't work like it used to." Because I was wheeling past them and she said, "I just thought they're not even looking." She like, I used to be able to like wobble my ass or do whatever she did that was her flirting side. I said, "Oh, you got a nice paint job on the back of your chair." And we were just like trying to humour it. But that was massive for her, just to realise that her flirting skills didn't work the way they used to. And then how did she adapt that? What did she do? And now she's one of the most confident women that I know. She's so strong. In fact, she is traveling the world on her own in a wheelchair at the moment. She's changed so much. And like I say, it's time. And it comes and goes. Yeah, of course it does.
Comes and goes and comes back again. Oh, Michelle, I could talk to you all day. And I am conscious of the fact that it is your morning and I'm going to let you get on with your day. And I just want to say a huge thank you so much for all of your time and wisdom and generosity today to just talk about the work you've been doing and the massive contribution that you've made to the spinal sexuality world. It's huge. I hope that you can go into your retirement knowing that you've handed over the mantle to a few people and that your contribution is massive. So thank you. And
Thank you very much having me as a guest, and I think it's massively important just to open up the conversations. And there's so many areas we haven't got to today. We've kind of just scratched the surface, and I think it's really important just to keep the conversations going, to give people that confidence to be able to ask the questions that they have themselves. Yeah, thank you.
You've just been listening to our first episode in a really good sex chat for season 2 with Michelle Donald. Amazing opportunity to have her join us on the podcast. Massive thank you for your time and your wisdom and for all of your learning and generosity into sharing your experience and your work with us. If you've enjoyed this episode of A Really Good Sex Chat, please like it on Spotify, tell a friend, or share it on your socials so that others can find it too. If you're interested in the work that we do at Care Rehab, please jump onto carerehab.com.au to check out our staff training dates, our clinical services for clients, and just feel free to jump in, say hi, send us an email, get in touch. We hope you've enjoyed season 2 of A Really Good Sex Chat and look forward to connecting soon.